The exhibition is called Nightshade and it's installed currently at Alternating Current Art Space in Windsor in Melbourne. I started my MA 18 months ago, and while I was initially very interested in producing an artist book as an outcome for the project, I've worked in the arts industry for a long time as a teacher and as a volunteer in an art gallery, and I've always been really interested in exhibition spaces and using exhibition spaces, so I was mostly thinking about it in terms of an exhibition from very early on. The work is a combination of digital prints and installation. There are 9 groups of images which are montaged onto the walls. And there is a small space which is known as the cupboard, and inside that quite narrow space are hanging 3 framed archival pieces of writing, one by my mother, one by my father, and one a childhood essay that I wrote when I was about 10. Then there's a video. Because the work involves not just archival album images, but also photographs of weeds, of plants, and there's that metaphor of the destructive behaviours of weeds and the destructive behaviours of domestic abusers. You know, the whole thing of thinking about gardening, my mum's history as a gardener and a farmer, and now someone who does voluntary work with bush regeneration, growth and weeds and so on. I toyed with that idea for a long time and thought, how can I make a video? So I found a way to animate my still images. My partner, who's a sound designer, and I collaborated on the soundtrack. He knew my work very well and we had many conversations, and he came up with a soundtrack that is a combination of the sound of rain falling on a corrugated iron roof, the kind of roof that we would have lived under, and that alternates with the sound of TV static, another memory of childhood and being awake in bed late at night, waiting for my dad to come home, probably drunk, and the TV program's ending and turning to that sound that people of my generation would remember, just a static sound. And then layered with those are the sounds from some of those TV programs I remember, and with voices. So they all relate to a kind of sense memory from my childhood. I want it to look poetic and affective. And there's another installation of a limited edition postcard which has on one side a photograph taken by my mother, an old one of Australian bushland, and on the other side is a piece of writing from my father, and it was a birthday note in which he said, "I loved you then, I love you still, I guess I always will." And that was a message that was confusing to me when I received it, and still is to this day. And there's also a stamp which I designed with an image of the nightshade plant on it. As I researched the nightshade, I discovered that it's a plant that has this reputation as a poison, and certain varieties of nightshade are a poison. But the black nightshade is poisonous sometimes and at other times not. So in some cultures, the berries and the leaves are harvested and used as a food, and they can also be used as a dye. I did some research into how to make dye out of them and did some experiments with dyeing cloth. And then, because I had been looking at some of the things that are stored in photo albums beyond just photographs, things like postcards and old news clippings and letters in some cases in my mother's albums, I began to think of the potential of the nightshade berry for making ink. The ink made from the nightshade berries is actually quite a deep purple. So that I bottled and installed with some dip pens and the postcard for that piece, which is titled I Loved You Then. That installation is interactive, and audience members are invited to write a message or adapt the message on the card to someone they love and post it to them. I wanted that message that felt ambiguous and confusing to me as a 20-year-old to have some more meaning and to be applied by people, hopefully, who think about what love really means and have someone that they love in a very genuine way. And for that message to be sent out as a way of repairing the confused love or lack of love that I felt as a witness to domestic violence. Each of the 9 print montages and the video are named after streets in which my parents lived during their relationship, preceding their marriage and then after their marriage. And each of those street names is further captioned with some text which comes from interviews I did with my mother about her memories of the 20 years that she spent with my father in a violent and controlling relationship. They are just snippets of longer stories, and they were designed to cover the spectrum of behaviours that are used by domestic abusers that we now know is a form of coercive control. And they hint at my mother's experiences rather than being overly explicit. Mum and I have a close relationship. I'm the eldest in the family, and I remember many of the things that she went through, and I remember her always putting on a very dignified face in public, despite what had happened at home and despite sometimes even physical evidence of the violence that she'd been through. I guess I wanted to hear her voice telling those stories and think about the way that she told them as part of my process. So we had conversations together and I recorded them. I followed her to some of her bush care meetings, and we had many hours as well walking around her garden and talking about the plants and talking about weeds. In that collaboration, it started to feel like it was her project as much as mine, and I really wanted to bring that to the fore. And because these are very personal stories, give her a lot of agency in how I presented them. She totally approves of it, I think, and she is very proud of the work, and she has been affected in a very positive way by the process that we've gone through together, in that she is now able to tell her stories to her closest friends. As we were installing my exhibition, the COVID-19 restrictions were increased in Melbourne, which meant that the opening could not go ahead and the public exhibition could not go ahead. The exhibition is still installed, so it's been up for about a month now, and we're now in an even deeper lockdown than when I finished the installation. So I've left it there, just hoping that when that 6 weeks is up and restrictions relax a little bit, that it might be enough to enable the exhibition to have a limited reopening.